Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Lambert, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Textile Exchange and the Responsible Leather Roundtable for this Responsible Leather Roundtable meeting. We might, give it an extra minute for people to log on before we actually start. And while we're doing that, maybe Stephanie, could you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, maybe we'll just go through our antitrust statement. So Textile Exchange convenes the textile community and values diversity of views, expertise, opinions, backgrounds, and experiences. It is expected that members of this community will collaborate by sharing ideas, information, and resources of publicly available information only, and avoid discussions on price, strategic plans, or other private and sensitive information. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So I'll give you a minute to read through our disclaimer, but basically the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this webinar belong solely to the speakers. And as the leader of the RLRT, Textile Exchange strives to maintain a neutral role. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So as you probably heard when you logged in, this session is being recorded and will be available on the Responsible Leather Roundtable website, as well as the Textile Exchange Hub library. And for those of you that don't know what the Textile Exchange Hub is, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll make sure to send you some information about it. Loads of very interesting resources on the Hub. And the slides will also be available. And you'll see some of the slides are quite dense today. There's a lot of information we want to share with you, and we might not have the opportunity to go into detail, but you'll have the time and the opportunity to go through the slides at your leisure. Next slide, please. Yes, so just before we start as well, please don't hesitate to put your name in the Zoom function here. You're all on mute, but we do welcome all your comments and questions. So please don't hesitate to use the chat function, and we'll be monitoring it throughout the whole session today. Next slide, please. We will also be using Mentimeter today. So for those of you that are not familiar, I would actually recommend that you just start off right now by typing in www.menti.com and entering the code that is indicated here on this slide. Maybe Larissa, you can also just put it in the chat if people want to go there. There we go. So let's move on to the next slide, please.
Sorry, waiting for my link for the chat.
Oh, sorry. Please go. That's fine. Did that go in?
There we go. This is the link.
Perfect. Thank you, Larissa. That's great.
And then let's see.
There we go. Perfect. Should we just go through the agenda maybe quickly before we jump to this? Sorry. Oh, there we go. Yep. Well, please just like it. That's great. So we've got quite a few participants today. Oh, South America, a lot of Americans. I hope everyone enjoyed the 4th of July. I'm guessing things are made a bit easier, I hope, with the COVID situation. We have quite a few in Europe. There we go. Is that Portugal or Spain there as well? Oh, a lot of Europeans today coming in.
Okay, I'll move to the next question then.
Yeah, let's go on to the next question. That sounds good. Yeah, so just please feel free to indicate, what you would like to learn from today's call. We haven't gone through the agenda yet, but yeah. Oh, someone. Yeah, please just indicate what you would like. Ooh, I think someone's unmuted themselves. Narissa, do you want to just double check that? What the updates are? Yes, that you will have. Give you a few extra minutes. Great. Yes, so all of that is going to be addressed. How is Leah going? Yeah, and general updates. Yeah, we'll definitely update you on that. And the new developments of responsible leather. Fantastic. Okay, shall we just move on to the agenda now? And you'll have the opportunity to see what we will be addressing today. Perfect. Yeah, let's go to the agenda first and then we'll go to the speakers. So for those of you that have been in touch with us or looked at our recent activities at the RLRT, a lot of our activity has been focused mainly on learning opportunities for the industry, and we had our series of webinars focused on traceability in the leather supply chain, where we welcomed quite a large number of other organizations and companies to share with us. And for those of you that have not had the opportunity to listen to those webinars, I would really encourage you to go to the Responsible Leather Roundtable website and listen to the recordings that are there whenever you have a moment. It's really interesting. So today, this meeting will be focused on giving you a little more insights into Textile Exchange's ambitious Climate Plus target, and introduce you to some of the strategies where we are using to reach this target, and how leather sits in all of this. So the Textile Exchange strategies that will be presented to you today, so we'll look into LEA, but we'll also look into the Preferred Fiber and Materials Matrix, which is a new tool, and the Corporate Fiber and Materials Benchmark. And we will take the second part of this call to give you an update on the piloting of the Leather Impact Accelerator, which started in January this year. So if we just go back to the speakers, I feel like the slides were, there we go. So we have today a full in-house Textile Exchange panel of speakers, including Sienna and Liesel, that we do not often have the opportunity to welcome on our Responsible Leather Roundtable meeting. So we're very, very happy to have them with us today. And they have very interesting information to share with you. So without any further ado, I think we can get started with Anne, whom I'm pretty sure you all know already. Anne is the Textile Exchange's Director of Impact Acceleration and has been leading all the work on leather. And today she'll be giving you more insight into Textile Exchange's Climate Plus goal and strategy, and how the work we are doing with leather actually fits into this strategy. So Anne, I'll let you take over from here. Anna.
Thank you, Nicole. And have we got an echo here?
A little echo. And Anne, now we can't hear you at all. You're muted, it seems to be.
Okay, I was trying to do it through the phone, but I will take my risk with my internet connection and do it through the web. You can hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. And thank you, Nicole, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for being on this. We're really, really excited to kind of be moving into that next phase of action with the leather work. But I'm going to start with a few quick words about textile exchange, and I'm sure that many of you have heard of us, or hopefully are already members, and if not, we certainly encourage you to join in. But Textile Exchange works with the industry to inspire and equip people to accelerate the adoption of preferred fibers and materials in the textile value chain. And our driving goal these days is what we call our Climate Plus goal. And I think if you go to the next slide, Stephanie, thanks. So we have the very big ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions of textile materials by 45% by the year 2030. And for those of you living in North America, I'm sure you're well aware of the heat dome and the fires and everything that's going on the West Coast particularly, but these impacts are being felt all around the world. And I think we're all feeling so much urgency to take action. But the plus is also really important because we're also addressing the impacts on soil health, water, and biodiversity. And everything is really firmly grounded in partnerships. And I'm sure you'll see in our other work, we're working with a lot of other organizations to make this happen. So next slide. So what we're doing is we're taking a portfolio approach. And again, Textile Exchange's core focus is on the pre-spinning or raw material side of the impacts. And this is a chart that again, many of you may have seen that shows the different impact areas for different fibers and materials that are indicated by the colors, leather being the brown one. And then it shows what's going to happen in terms of carbon emissions if we follow a business as usual path, or if we aggressively go into a substitution and innovations approach to bend the curve. So I want to call out a few things, and if you can just click once, Stephanie, this should be animated. First is the 37% figure. And I just want to call out that this is a somewhat highly debated figure. We've put it in there because that's just the research that was done at the time when we came up with this slide. But I really want to acknowledge that it is not a final figure. There's a lot of conversation about the actual way to conduct a full LCA or an accurate, more representative LCA analysis on leather, the allocations that go towards beef and other outputs, et cetera. But for now, I think the important thing is that leather does represent a really strong opportunity for us to have a positive impact. And the good news is there's a lot going on in the beef industry as well as the leather industry. So if you can click on the next slide or the next one, so talking about leather and substitution, our core focus with our work on leather is to support substitution to better leather, not moving away from leather into other materials. And as you'll see, as we talk about Leah, there are so many opportunities to make a positive difference by engaging with the leather supply chains and with the different tools we're developing. And then finally, the last one is innovations and developing regenerative practices that will sequester carbon, enhance biodiversity are going to play a key role here. And the exciting thing about leather is the scope and the scale of opportunity we have, not to just avoid the negative, but to contribute towards the positives that will help us meet the needs of this planet. So next slide. So tropical forests in particular are probably the greatest vector of influence that we're going to be able to work through with LEA. And they provide a wide range of valuable ecosystem services that deliver benefits, such as the regulation of local, regional, and global climate. And the large-scale loss of forests really jeopardizes these critical services and can negatively impact people and the wildlife far beyond the location of the actual services. we could go down the path of facts and figures forever, but there's some really interesting research that look at the role of forests to regulate important natural processes, such as rainfall patterns and nutrient cycles that are really critical, not only for the ecosystem services, but also for the productivity of agriculture in itself. And when we look at the Amazon in particular, which is a fairly acknowledged hotspot, deforestation in the Amazon can really actually act as a driver of global climate change, and it can impact rainfall patterns as far away as the Western United States. So right now, large-scale forest loss in the Amazon has been projected to potentially reduce rainfall by up to 20% in the coastal Northwest US and up to 50% in the Sierra Nevada snowpack. So those are just a few facts and figures. But for me as a Canadian, they are landing really hard because British Columbia, my old hometown, is feeling the effects of this reduced rainfall through the forest fires, and people are literally dying because of this. And then, of course, there's also the large-scale productivity losses in these major agricultural areas, and that has really serious consequences for food security and can potentially even cause supply shocks in the market and increase the price volatility of agricultural products. And again, I think we're living that right now. I know soybeans prices are through the roof. So all this is to say that commitments to verified zero gross deforestation, cattle production throughout the supply chain are the real kind of action points to help ensure that forests are conserved and that we're safeguarding those value ecosystem services and the benefits they provide. Just as another fact, the primary export destination for Brazilian hides and leather by value are China and Italy. So a lot of companies think that they're sourcing from Italy in particular. We hear that a lot, but you have to know that very little of leather that you're buying from Italy is actually from Italian cows. It's very likely that unless you have mapped your supply chain all the way through to the slaughterhouse level or beyond, you may well have Brazilian hides or other hides from hotspot high-risk areas in your supply chain. So next slide. So the good news is we can really make change happen. And in this presentation and in past ones, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the impact incentives and the deforestation conversion-free scope in particular, which are designed to give brands a tool to directly support farmers to stop deforestation or conversion of natural ecosystems. And conversion of natural ecosystems is typically the conversion of grasslands over into a cropping situation, not just saying that we're going to stop grazing, because grazing is actually a way to preserve natural ecosystems. So, I think with everything that's in the news, we know that we cannot afford to take a slow, thoughtful, considered approach to addressing climate change. What we need to do is we need to act fast and we need to act big. So our goal with our work on leather and Leah in particular is to break down those barriers to action. Yes, supply chains are long and complex, but we can bypass them in the short term by using the impact incentives to support farmers to protect their forests now. And yes, farmers are facing many pressures to increase their productivity, as we can see from this graph, let me rephrase that. Farmers are experiencing a lot of pressure to increase their productivity. But as we can see from this graph, it is possible to increase productivity while still protecting forests and natural ecosystems. So in this slide, you'll see that productivity in this time period, and unfortunately, I think some of these numbers may be reversing now, but productivity was able to increase while deforestation decreased. And that's by applying a lot of just good thinking around best practices in terms of getting the best use of the land and highest productivity of the land. And that's where tools like the impact partnership model can help program partners that are on the ground work with farmers to find those ways to increase their productivity and continue to conserve their forests. So cattle production does not need to come at the expense of forests. Next slide. So we've got, this is a slide showing the different strategies that we as Textile Exchange see to address the Climate Plus goals. Our area of focus is on the first three boxes, increasing the uptake of recycled fibers, regenerative practices, and mitigating land use change. Right now, LEA is focused on the land use change, which is specifically our deforestation conversion free scope. We are also looking at adding a scope for the LEA impact incentives and potentially other impact incentives that will be a regenerative scope. That will be after we've gone through this first piloting phase. So I think there's going to be a really good opportunity with the LEA and particularly the impact incentives as tools to help brands invest in responsible supply in a very fast way, while still taking the time with the supplier module of LEA to start mapping out their supply chains and eventually connecting them to these more responsible sources of supply, whether it's regenerative, deforestation-free, animal welfare, etc. The other thing that I'll say is that we're working really hard in the background to map out what are those KPIs, the key performance indicators, the data points, the information that we want to collect with the impact incentives and from the supply chain, so that we can really start mapping the progress towards the Climate Plus goals. And we'll do that on an aggregate level, but we also want to help the brands map their own progress. So part of this we'll be covering in Liesel's presentation about the market reports and how we're benchmarking brands in their progress towards the different goals. And then we are going to, with the impact incentives, collect very specific data that will be tied to every single farm and every single impact incentive, so that when you as a brand invest in impact incentives, you will know exactly what kind of impact you're having. So the core element of the data is going to be the farm polygons. And we're looking at how to apply metrics. There's something called the STAR metric to measure the biodiversity impacts. And then we can overlay with those heat maps on carbon stocks and conservation values and risk areas. So hopefully that will help us all make progress towards the Climate Plus goals. And with that, I will pass it on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Liesel is Textile Exchange's European and Material Strategy Director, and she'll be giving you some insight into the leather module and the results from the 2020 edition of the Corporate Fiber and Materials Benchmark. And please do not hesitate to put your questions in the chat. We'll take some time after Liesel's presentation to address any of your questions you may have already. So there we go. Liesel, I'll let you speak. Take over.
Thanks, Nicole. And a shame we didn't get the full splendor of Sienna's presentation. Bad luck on the connection, Sienna, but there'll be plenty of opportunities to reconnect on this topic. And I guess in some ways talking about the corporate fiber materials benchmark is a nice connection with how you can apply some of the tools, including this one, into your materials journey. And that's essentially what the corporate benchmark is all about. It's helping a company along that journey. And as Anne said, we have no time to lose, and we really need to accelerate and scale the good things that can be done. Of which you're learning many through this roundtable. So I guess, Larissa, do I just tell you to ask you to move to the next? Great, thank you. Leather, and you will see a nice little package of slides for you. As we said at the start of this webinar or this roundtable, we're covering a lot of ground. So while you'll see a lot of information on these slides, it's really just to help you navigate some of the information that might be quite buried in all the reports and things that we put out this year, and we put out every year around the corporate benchmark results. So lots of information. I'm just going to touch the surface. Next slide. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an intro to the program, a quick refresher. Obviously, there's more information and I can follow up with more detail, but just a light touch to get you into the groove. And then we will dive a bit deeper into the leather results, as Nicole said. And I have a few discussion questions that we may or may not get time to discuss on this call, but would love to have your thinking caps on. So I've presented those. I think there's about 4 discussion points. So next slide, please. Starting off with the Material Change Index and the insights that we produce. This is just a little reminder that we do work within a framework. As I said at the start, it is a journey and a way of supporting you along that, if you like, that roadmap of preferred fibres and materials, starting with really getting a grasp of how to embed a strategy around this stuff. So that's nothing new, nothing kind of no rocket science around us needing to be quite strategic around what we do. Looking at your portfolio of materials, and that's once again something that we ask you or we support you on in terms of identifying what are your priority materials in terms of volume and in terms of risk and opportunity. And then there's a number of questions that we take you down for each of those, what we call modules, material modules. And then we're increasingly shifting to looking at everything we do, right, whether it's materials or energy or whatever, moving from a linear path into something that is much more circular. So the circularity piece of this framework is, I think, becoming increasingly important as an underpinning model. As we've mentioned, Textile Exchange is not the deep expert on it, but it's certainly a key component of how we think about materials going forward. And you can see on the panel right over on the right, we've got biodiversity there, and some of you will know and have been engaged, thank you very much, in helping us test run a biodiversity module, which is going to be increasingly, once again, increasingly important in our Climate Plus strategy. And the beautiful thing is that whilst this might seem like it's growing and growing and growing, a lot of this, these needs and this it's very systemic. It's very much about the interconnectivity. And one of the reasons we really felt excited about bringing what we do around corporate benchmarking of what we used to call just PFMs into this sort of framework is that so it doesn't sound or doesn't become too overwhelming or disjointed. So if you're a company that's already doing quite a lot of work in your materials portfolio, it's highly likely that you're touching on some of the needs of nature and climate, of course. So that's increasingly how we're positioning this work, and of course aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals in this decade of action. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker now because I haven't got a lot of time. So next slide, please, is the framework. Once again, you'll have access to this. It marries up with what Sienna was talking about in terms of what are our preferred materials, and then how do we start to dig into deeper in terms of where they are in their maturity and delivery on sustainability. So that guides what we do. And then I think on the next slide, thanks, is sort of showing how this all joins up. So the benchmarking, the corporate benchmarking drives, as I said, your management and performance of preferred materials embedded within a strategy. we then really hone in on the volumetric data. So part of that reporting is around the uptake or use of materials, and that's a really important, a critical part in terms of being able to model outcomes and impacts. And, you know, we could spend the whole hour talking about how imperfect it is in terms of standardizing conversion rates, you know, and loss waste rates between tiers, you know, the systems that we have to capture this information is, some of it's still very immature. But one of the key aspects of benchmarking that I really, really like is that the more we do this, the more we improve it, the more we do it together, the better we get at it, and the more reliable the results are, and the better everybody is in terms of tracking progress and having an impact. So that's how it works together. And I think on the next slide just brings those components into some of the results and the tools that we are refining year on year. And for any of you that have followed the launch of the benchmark this year will know that we have a nice new material change index leaderboard, the top left-hand corner there. We've updated our dashboard. We're doing another round of improvements on that to make it more interactive. We didn't quite meet our deadline to get that out and live. And then, of course, the insights report, which aggregates all that data, all that knowledge into a report every year that we can track improvements. Next slide. Thank you. And there's a lot of information on this slide, but one of the important things to tell you is, you know, one of the big questions is, what do I get back as a company? So scorecards are our big gift to the industry, ranging from standard scorecards, which everybody gets as part of the participation, through to more advanced that have a bit more sophisticated impacts and outcome data in them, and then we offer a consulting service. These are all HTML digitalized scorecards, and once again, they get better every year as the technology improves, but they're nice. They're looking pretty nice this year. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to take you really quickly through the results, and you can certainly dig in later and come back to me with more questions. But the next slide, the next few slides actually, is just showing you how it's laid out in the report. I've put some highlights here around the key things that Nicole is an instrumental expert in the review process of the leather module. These were some of the key results. No surprise, animal welfare and deforestation, highest risk reported by participants. Policy is the main instrument for actually mitigating risk at the moment. None of this is surprising to you. Everybody's getting a little bit better, a little bit more sensitized to how to start mapping supply chains, getting back with the thanks to, you know, the Leather Working Group and others, getting back to tannery and sort of the processing piece has really improved over the years. Digging right back to birth farm or what have you is obviously a lot more challenging. So work going on in those areas, and a lot of companies reporting the use of particularly of RWG certified supply chains. So next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to skip through these. These are the results in more detail, and it just brings you the qualitative and the quantitative results that are in the insights report into something quite visual and relatively summarized. You can see some quotes on each page. So they travel through risk management, and in the next couple of slides, if you could just go through them, Larissa, how companies are investing in their supply and the technologies, what level of transparency we're getting at the moment in terms of through the tiers and back to farm. And then on the next slide, it's target setting. This is actually really important, I think, in terms of setting ambitions, being public around that. Anne and I and the rest of the teams that are looking at what a deforestation conversion-free guidance is. And I know you on this roundtable have done a lot more work into that, so that's fantastic. We'll be tracking that. Next slide. uptake. Back to my point about, the more we measure, the better we get at this. It's one of our biggest challenges, and it comes up in the discussion, is how we, along with many other challenges, but it is how we get to a common denominator around leather. At the moment, we're using square meters, but some companies are reporting in metric tons, and then of course, there's lots of variations depending on the leather type, the animal species, the type of product, etc., etc. But needless to say, this is really important work, and I do think we will get there as an industry, so we can start getting more aligned on methodologies and that data. Next slide, please, is the outcomes and impact. So we asked companies in the survey how they're starting to set those KPIs that Anne mentioned earlier, not only around uptake of materials, but in terms of animal welfare and land practices and that sort of thing. A lot of work going on in this space, and we're really touching the surface here. But we have brought some of that information into, which you can't quite see on the left-hand bottom corner, but this is the resource use and the improved practices in terms of tanneries is something that we're tracking at the aggregate in the dashboard that is available, and the links are all on each page, so you'll be able to explore that if you haven't already. And then I think the next couple of slides just takes us into the discussion. So I'm just going to read through these very quickly, Larissa, and then stop. But some of the big takeaways for the team this year are really around, what is preferred. We have captured the use of leather working group status at a very blunt sort of aggregated level. We don't have any deeper detail into the options that LWG presents. We are introducing the RWS, which now covers sheepskin, and I can just see Anne's comment about how we capture LEA, which is obviously going to be a hugely important indicator of impact deep on the ground, which is what we really want to focus on here as textile exchange. The next big discussion topic is around how we present the results, and I've had a few chats with people on this call even around what's best in class. Should it be it's very hard to do well in leather at the moment, particularly in terms of preferred material use. So leather scoring, it's very difficult to score well, as I said, but there's other ways that we might be able to look at it in terms of best in class. I'll stop there for now, but lots to discuss on that one. And then the next couple of discussion points very quickly. We're very keen to update or extend our fibre uptake calculation guides and fibre conversion methodologies, and introduce more, quote unquote, standardization or best practice on leather to support the industry. And there's a nice process that we have that arrived at these two reports, and be interesting to hear your thoughts on doing the same for leather, or indeed if there's something out there already that we could use, that would be even better. And then the last comment I had to put out to you was on the next slide, was just around the indicators that we track. And once again, Anne mentioned this earlier, and I'm hoping that within this round table, it would be great to get some ideas on how to track, what are the big ticket items that we should be tracking in terms of impacts and outcomes, and what are some of those methodologies that we could be using. So lots of food for thought, but I'm very conscious of time. It's a busy schedule, and I appreciate being able to report out to this group on where we've got to on leather. So thank you, Nicole and team. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Liesl. That was
and join us. You're welcome to.
Exactly. That was I was going to say as well. I would encourage everyone to really participate in the corporate fibre and materials benchmark. You can get a lot out of it as a company. So I would really, even if you're just starting off in your sustainability journey, I would really recommend you doing it. So yeah, thank you, Liesl. We'll just take a few minutes now to address some of the questions that we've received. Sienna, are you back with us? I know Sienna has tried to relocate to a place where she has better connection, I hope. Sienna, are you there?
I don't see her.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we've lost her. Actually, Liesl, do you think you could maybe answer some of the PFMM questions we have? And we'll also be following up with Sienna afterwards. But I know you've been very involved in it.
I can do my best for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, the first one you actually answered already in the chat box, but maybe you can just, say out loud for everyone to hear. But we missed out on the data sources used in the matrix assessment. So she mentioned there was 3 of them.
Yeah, trying to bring once again a holistic approach to how we assess the various strengths and potential weaknesses of different programs. So it takes in and I think we did all hear the mention of the CATS, which is the certification assessment tools that WWF lead on producing, which are very much about assessing what is in the requirements of the standards and other initiatives. The one that you might have missed was the reference to the HIG MSI, so the Sustainable Apparel Coalition HIG Material Sustainability Index and the life cycle assessment values, what are called midpoints, that are in the HIG MSI, which is a starting point, as many of you know. They're based on global averages, they're based on best available data. It's not perfect, as Anne was saying earlier, but once again, I think that idea of continually improving and best available data and the transparency around that process is super important. So the HIG MSI is part of that. And then there's the one that's the most challenging, but arguably one of the most important, is how are some of these management practices and outcomes being generated on the ground. And we all know with impacts, particularly in natural systems and landscapes and living systems, things would change all the time, and of course with climate change and disruptions to natural cycles, we're only going to be seeing more of that. So those practice and those good practices and those outcomes that we know, in terms of this concept called the no regrets, right? No regrets policy and the precautionary principle. We know there's good practices. If we're going to get the impact every year, or if it's going to take 10 years, we know that there's different scales and speeds in terms of climate and carbon sequestration, etc. So that's the third component. I'll stop there.
Great. Yeah, and I think that answers another one of the questions. Someone was asking, how does the HIG MSI compare to the PFM matrix? So I think that answers that at the same time. I've got one question as well that regroups both the matrix and the corporate fiber and materials benchmark. So would the matrix define the preferred materials for the CFMB reporting?
That's the goal, yes. I mean, as the topic gets more, if you like, important, and you guys get more aligned and focused on making the improvements and changes that we need to make very quickly within this next decade. We keep saying that, but of course this decade has already been chipped away at. The idea is that we are aligned as an organization, as an industry, and that these sort of feed and accelerate and scale each other. So the more that everybody takes part in the benchmark, in the corporate benchmarking program, as Anne pointed out, corporate benchmarking is driving a race to the top. At a company level, both suppliers and brands now, I should add, and then the benchmarking of different programs is what you're seeing more of through the PFM matrix, which is saying, this particular program or standard or initiative offers these real opportunities. It might not be so strong on this, that, or the other, but it's a tool to make those decisions, and yes, that will eventually drive the weighting of the programs within methodology we use for the CFMB program.
Great. Yeah, everything's just linking together. It's fantastic to see. And then just a final question. I don't know if you know this, but the fibers that are currently included in the matrix, do you know which ones those are? We can get back to people on that afterwards, otherwise.
Yeah, it's starting off with a reasonably limited number of materials, from cotton, polyester, we call it synthetic, so polyester and nylon are both covered, wool and linen. And the way we're kind of capturing, if you like, the spillover, because obviously there's a lot of interest and a lot going on in other fibers and materials. Oh, sorry, man-made cellulosics is in there as well. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. But in terms of branded materials, so, you know, innovation going on within suppliers, if you like, and of course Lenzing's Tencel branded fibers are a good example of that. These will come out through what we're calling a supplier directory. So whilst the materials are going to probably stay generic within the tool, there will be the option to kind of segue into a supplier directory that can give you more granular detail on what's going on within different suppliers.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And again, sorry for everyone, about missing out on Sienna's presentation. What we'll do is we'll make sure to get a clean recording that will add to the recording of this session, and send you all the relevant links and stuff, so you can get all the information you need on the preferred fiber and materials matrix. And do not hesitate to send us your questions as well. Leather will be included in the matrix in the second round. So that will be interesting, and I think it'll be interesting to discuss with this roundtable as well. So because we're running short on time anyhow, we'll just move on to the piloting, the updates on the LEA piloting. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So today we won't be giving you an introduction to, you know, the Leather Impact Accelerator. For those of you that are new to it, I'd really recommend that you just check out the Leather Impact Accelerator webpage, and Larissa, maybe you can put the link into the chat function there. Today we'll just give you a real update on how the piloting is going. As I mentioned earlier, we launched LEA in January this year, and we are piloting the tool throughout the whole year. So starting with the standard benchmarks, we've heard benchmark mentioned quite a few times. When it comes to the Leather Impact Accelerator, we have standard benchmarks. So the idea is to benchmark standards, not to benchmark different materials or different companies amongst each other. It's really benchmarking standards to our requirements. We have 3 standard benchmarks included in LEA: the Animal Welfare Standard Benchmark, the Leather Production Environmental Standard Benchmark, and the Leather Production Social Standard Benchmark. So next slide, please. Sorry. And as I was saying, so through the process of benchmarking, we are aiming to identify and acknowledge existing standards that meet a certain level of improved practices. So moving on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to take a minute to run you through the benchmarking process. And this hasn't been done before, so it might be interesting. What we want to do is have a benchmarking process that is robust, so that, you know, when we do qualify or identify a standard, its approval actually, you know, is credible and is based on a robust process. So looking at this slide, we've got the applicant, which is typically the standard owner, and then we have a benchmark leader who is an independent expert within the scope of the benchmark, so that being social, environmental, or animal welfare for the moment. And then we have the LEA team, and that's us, basically coordinating this process, managing the administrative side, and also just being there in case of any, let's say, disagreement or problems along the process. So the way it starts off is once the applicant has applied, so the standard owner has applied to be benchmarked, they will firstly do a self-assessment of their standard against our benchmark. So if you just move on to the next slide, please. This is just to give you an idea of how it works. It's basically a massive Excel sheet. We have, on the left here, so this is for the leather production social standard benchmark. We have all our benchmark requirements. So these are topics that must be addressed by standard that will be recognized by LEA. And so the standard owner will compare its own standard to these requirements, matching the different criteria they have in their standard to meet the different requirements. They'll provide us with any further clarifications or documentations that is needed to ensure that there is an alignment there. And they will self-assess if they have they believe they align or not. The self-assessment is conducted both for the benchmark scope, so that being leather production social, leather production environmental, or animal welfare at the farm level and slaughter. Next slide, please. Then what happens is that this self-assessment will then be reviewed by the benchmark leader. As I was saying, the benchmark leader is an independent expert, so it won't be a textile exchange. And they'll review the self-assessment that has been carried out by the standard owner. They'll basically assess the alignment between the standard and the benchmark requirements. And in this stage of the benchmark, the benchmark leader will identify non-alignments and any elements that need to be clarified. So after the first review, any comments or any clarifications that are needed are actually sent back to the standard owner, and then will be discussed over a meeting with the benchmark leader to make sure that everyone understands each other there. And the applicant will be given a certain time frame to review their self-assessment and complete it according to whatever is lacking. The self-assessment that is completed will then be sent in for a second review by the benchmark leader. And following this second review, a benchmark report will be issued. So basically concluding as well if there is alignment between the LEA benchmark and the standard being assessed. The benchmark report will then be given to a benchmark steering committee for review. The benchmark steering committee is an expert committee of selected stakeholders composed of, it will typically be composed of representatives of the industry, potentially NGOs, and experts within the standard scope being benchmarked, So if it's animal welfare, it'd be animal welfare experts sitting there. Once the steering committee has reviewed the benchmark report and hopefully, any issues that have been identified are addressed and there's no further concern, I'd say, a provisional approval decision is made. And that provisional approval decision is made public, and we will have a public comment period. That won't be very long, but we'll make sure that certain stakeholders are well aware of the comment period. And following this comment period, again, if no major issue arises that can't be addressed at least, the final approval is made and the standard is recognized as or approved as a LEA approved standard. So that's the process in short for you there. So moving to the next slide. Oh yeah, so just before that, just to give you an update on the actual status of the benchmarking, today we have 2 standards being benchmarked for the leather production social scope. We have 1 being benchmarked for the leather production environmental scope, and we have 1 or is it 2, Anne? Maybe you can just animal welfare standards being benchmarked for the animal welfare scope. And so all of these standards are in the process right now of doing the self-assessment more. And so we're hoping to finalize the benchmarking process by the end of this summer. So that's that. And I will now leave, Stephanie take over on the LEA recognized suppliers.
Sure, thanks, Nicole. So the supplier recognition is actually one of the most recent additions to the LEA program. So most of the documents and different aspects of the program were launched in January, as Nicole just mentioned, but this supplier recognition process came in, I think, the end of May. So it's quite recent. So, but essentially it is an opportunity for leather production suppliers to become rewarded and showcased as a LEA recognized supplier. So that way brands and retailers can also have an opportunity to search for suppliers who are already part of the LEA program and working towards more sustainable supply chains. So in order for a LEA production supplier to become LEA recognized, they need to be certified to a standard or two standards that will meet the LEA leather production standards benchmarks that Nicole just spoke to. So both for environmental and social standards. And they will also be participating in a high traceability system. So I forgot to add the link here, but the link to this document, it's called Supplier Recognition Process, is available on our webpage, leatherimpactaccelerator.org. It's under the How to Participate section for suppliers. So if you are a supplier and you're interested in becoming assessed in order to be recognized, then you can read that document and also contact Leah at textileexchange.org to fill in the application form. And once a supplier is recognized under LEA, then we will share a listing on the website with the supplier's consent if they would like to be listed. And that will give brands, again, the opportunity to search for LEA recognized suppliers by their facility name, location. We'll also be sharing information about the leather production standards that they are certified to. So for environmental and social, the certification details about the validity date and the supply chain, the scope certificate will be listed there as well. And then we'll have an opportunity to share additional details that kind of fall outside the scope of LEA and the criteria in the standards benchmark. But good to share, more sustainable attributes such as supply chain visibility down to slaughterhouse, other traceability systems that they're using, compliance with CDHC, working with pig, and some of those other attributes such as saving water, energy, and chemicals, or using alternative processes that are deemed more responsible or sustainable. So we are welcoming suppliers at this time to apply for this recognition. So we recognize that it will possibly take time for some suppliers to become certified to standards that are meeting these benchmarks, especially since a lot of those standards are currently being benchmarked, but we're happy to work alongside the suppliers and help them understand what the requirements are and lead them in the right direction to certification, or even benchmark some of the standards that they're currently working with to see if they can be LEA approved. So again, you can email us at leah@textileexchange.org to get started, or check our website for more information. Okay, and I think we're passing it on to Josefina to talk about our impact incentives pilots.
Yes, hi. Yes, okay, so just briefly to introduce myself for the ones that haven't met me, my name is Josefina Eisel. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm mainly in charge of identifying pilots in this region in Latin America or anywhere else in the world. So next one, please. Okay, so I think we have already introduced about our program of the Leather Impact Accelerator and what are the impact incentives, but just to give you a brief, just to remind you, as you know, the impact incentives is an evolution of the traditional credit trading systems. So in this case, we identify farms. We ask them if they haven't implement animal welfare standard. That's one of our scopes, and the other is the deforestation and conversion free. So if that farm complies with those two scopes, they are able to sell their credits. They can either do it through the impact incentive program. Those are the farms that are kind of ready to get verified and sell the credits, or we can do it through the impact partnership that I will present on the next slide, please. Well, maybe just a little bit about why are the impact incentives important, what are the benefits that they offer. Usually there are one-stop shop for brands. In this case, we are focusing on leather, but a farm can have many products inside. They can have many, so they can sell not only leather credits, but impact incentives, but they also can sell beef, cotton, soy, eggs, or whatever other products they have. We have one platform that it's called the Impact Alliance, where a farmer can really, that is implementing sustainable practices, can sell credits from all of their products. Also, it increased value for brands. The company really can report on a combined program where they're really creating impact on a farm or a group of farmers. Also, bigger numbers. Usually, you can also collect the impact on like one farm or more than one farm, and really the impact is larger than just working with one single program. Also greater reach. I mean, you can really have, through the alliance, you can have stories about the individual farmers and combine also impact data. Next one, please. And what are the impact partnerships? Usually we identify the need of supporting farmers on the implementation of different practices. In this case, if there's particular need on animal welfare. So what we usually do is when we identify a farm that needs some support on the implementation of the animal welfare practices, we select a local partner that I'm going to introduce later on about how we are doing with one of our pilots, that usually this local partner that is, in many cases, is an NGO, but it can also be a local organization, a local consultancy firm that has already been working with the farmers on different actions related to sustainability. So usually what they do is support farmers to achieve the certification level or support to do the verification on deforestation and conversion free. Next one, please. So what an impact partnership offer usually is more opportunities. In many cases, the farmers that don't reach the level don't really enter into this kind of program. So we really support to develop like a wider supply chain. Not only the best-in-class farmers can really be part of this program, but we also, together with brands, we give them support to achieve the desired level and also to connect the farmers with the brands and understand at both sides of the supply chain which are the needs and which are the asks from the brands and from the farmers. So it really creates a stronger relationship, more flexibility, and better understanding of both situations. Next one, please. Well, yes. So as I said before, here up on the left, we have different kind of farms. So for example, if you have a farm A, you can see that farm has already met the best practices, the benchmark level. But in the middle, you have a group B of farms, because it's usually a group of farmers that maybe they had reached the level on deforestation and conversion free, which in many cases is the case, but not the animal welfare. So most of the investment from the brands goes into this animal welfare support, or in the case of DCF, as we have on the last one, is more on verification and understand and explaining the farmers how to develop the polygons of the farm and show what's the situation in relation to deforestation or conversion. So usually, as you see here, that circle on the right, we identify program partners that usually support us and support the farmers into this data collection, the verification. We usually hire like either a certification body or an independent body that can make the verification, and they also deliver training to farmers, and then the farmers sell their incentive to the brands, and that gives them more credibility, and we usually help them build a story about what's the real impact behind this program. Next one, please. So how they work. Yeah, so usually, just if you can keep passing. So this is usually a farm that what we check if they meet or not the requirement. We hire we or the farmer together with the program partner hire a verification body. If they meet the standard, they just put the incentives into this incentive trading platform. Next one, please. Or if there is a group of farmers that usually sell these impact partnership credits, they also work with like a group of farmers. Usually we start with a group of 5 to 10 farmers just to do the first on this piloting phase, but then we can add as many farmers as our program partner wants to add and is able to manage. And if they either the impact incentive or the impact partnership meet the criteria, they put the incentives in the trading platform. And next one, please, if you just keep passing. So these incentives, we just put them, there is a facilitator that usually is the connection between the brands and the pilots, and usually is the one that help us develop the story and really explain which are all the areas of impact, all the indicators that the brands then can make the claim when they purchase the incentives. Next one, please. Well, one of our scopes, and yeah, I think later on we have also an example of our pilot is the deforestation and conversion free. As we explained before, we have this working group that developed the criteria. We have a cutoff date of January 1st, 2020. All that is under this criteria is aligned with the Accountability Framework Initiative, where they set the basis, and most of the brands are working with accountability framework, just to make sure we are all aligned and not all of us develop a different criteria of what we consider DCF and what are the scopes and what are not. Next one, please. Next one, please. Well, the other is the animal welfare benchmark that as we said, there are already some standards that have been approved that we are doing the benchmark. And what's interesting here in Brazil, I think it's important that animal welfare hasn't been an issue for the last years. Usually in this area, when it's related to cattle, everybody was talking more about deforestation, conversion, or like good practices. But animal welfare was not a big issue, and we have identified that there are not many farmers neither trained or certified with any existing standard. There are only a few, and there is not so much market demand. So it's for this region is quite a new issue, and from other regions we have also identified pilots in Africa. So that's something that really needs investment and support and training. So it's going to be really a challenge for the next years on animal welfare that we have already been addressing, and we also identify a standard that is developed by a local firm that I think it's also important because it adjusts to the local situation. Next one, please. So Produzindo Certo is our program partner, is the NGO that we are working in Brazil. They used to be called Aliança da Terra. Maybe some of you know them by Aliança da Terra, but they have developed, and in the last year they changed their name to Produzindo Certo, which means producing right. And they really have a story to tell. They have been working with farmers for many years, and the impact is not only on these two areas, but there are many areas of impact that Produzindo Certo, the farmers in their program, can tell, and can really we are helping them to build a story. Next one, please. So in this case, this is a pilot phase. So we said, okay, let's start with 5 farms. Usually a farmer in Brazil or a farm has like a lot of cattle. So in this case, we have already between these 5 farms about 40,000 animals. So that's already a big impact, but it's only 5 farms. So some of them are larger than others. So we usually work with middle to large farms. We can of course also include in the future small holders, but for the sake of this pilot, we are working with this one, and also we want to make sure that when the brands get involved, we can also offer as many credits as their sourcing volumes. Next one, please. Sorry. No, just to give you just a short, usually the farmers that we are working with Producindo Certo, as I said, they're based in Brazil. They're based in the Mato Grosso state. The Mato Grosso has 3 different biomes. One is the Amazon, the other one is the Cerrado, and the third one is the Pantanal. So the farmers that are part of the Producindo Certo program, they are either in the Amazon or the Cerrado, so we can show the impact and the conservation of those 2 biomes, which are really of high risk of deforestation. So, and in each of these farms, we have indicators where we show which is the area under preservation, which are the areas that we are going to work on animal welfare, the areas that need investment and improvement. And of course, we are also taking into account other social indicators, other carbon, like also carbon stock from the forest or from the soil. So there is a lot of potential, not only from this pilot, but from many others that we have identified already in Brazil, Argentina, Zimbabwe. There are many ones that can really be part of this program in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Josefina. That was great. Actually, we might have to skip the Mentimeter because there were some questions that popped up regarding the LEA recognized suppliers, and I think that are interesting to address because I know that's a new concept as well. So one of the questions, and Anne and Stephanie, please just jump in as well. I'll answer them, but please complete my answers. The first question is, does LEA recognized suppliers mean preferred leather? Preferred leather will be defined by through the preferred fiber and materials matrix, and it won't be limited to just one supplier. So I hope that helps understand the process. It's kind of the way it's done for other fibers is, for instance, if you're comparing conventional cotton to organic cotton, so it isn't just one supplier of organic cotton, but the whole, alternative, I would say. And I believe things will be done in a similar fashion for leather. And I'll just make sure that Sienna sends a bit more information on the indicators that are going to be used to do the assessment for leather in the preferred fiber and materials matrix. The second question we got was, what's the difference between LEA recognized suppliers and LWG rated suppliers? And I think that's a great question to ask. So LEA recognized suppliers, as Stephanie was saying, they have to be certified to a social and an environmental standard that has been approved by our standard benchmark. And as I was mentioning earlier, we are in the process of actually benchmarking several standards at the moment, so social and environmental for leather production. And so it could just be that a LEA recognized supplier is certified to something different than LWG. So as long as they're certified to a social and environmental standard that meets our benchmark, then they will be recognized. I hope that clarifies things on that one. And I don't know if Anne, you want to add anything?
Yeah, Nicole, the only thing I'd call out is that our benchmark is really built around the LWG bronze.
For the environmental one, yep.
Yeah, for the environmental. So that means that if somebody's is LWG, they're halfway through to meeting the LEA requirements, but they have to complement it with the social. But exactly. Again, we are now opening it up and bringing in other standards. So hopefully
Yeah,
that'll.
and maybe I can also add on to that as well, because I mean, since we developed these benchmarks, LWG has also, developed the Protocol 7, where they've included now a social scope in the protocol. From my understanding, this is not a mandatory section right now, but they have called out a list of different standards or social initiatives that are approved of under LWG. So it could well be as well, we're hoping, that there will also be, some alignment between some of the standards that they've approved in the LWG protocol and the ones we'll be approving through our benchmarking process. So yeah, and then one last question from Johan. Could the LEA recognized suppliers make claims regarding its upstream footprint, and in particular in regards to DCF or animal welfare? And so at this point, as we were saying, we're going to be focused only on what's happening at leather production, and adding on to that, in the future, we are hoping to go further back, hopefully, but we, as Stephanie was mentioning also during her presentation, we know that, some suppliers are, are just certified to environmental standards right now, and don't have the social scope covered. So we want to encourage the social scope to be covered, and more traceability and visibility in the leather production supply chain to happen. Is what we're trying to build up right now, and then hopefully we'll be able to add on. We will be, as Stephanie mentioned and showed in her slide, we will also offer the possibility for suppliers that are recognized through LEA to also add on any additional benefits or sustainability benefits they can offer. So traceability systems used, and if possible, also that visibility down to the farm level that will be clearly indicated. So yeah. There we go. And I just saw Christina. Yeah. So yeah. So that's that. I think we're coming to the top of the hour. So next slide, please, and we'll just run through quickly what's new there. And I'll just let you take over on the new materials and the mass balance comparison that is now available on our website.
Yeah, just to say that there have been some confusion at times about how do impact incentives work, which are essentially credit trading system or book and claim system. How do they compare to mass balance and even identity preservation? Is that actually on our website now? I know we're working on the document, but I'm not sure if it's posted yet, but if it isn't, keep an eye open for it. We're just working on some formatting.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks. Next slide before so next Responsible Leather Roundtable event, is no, it won't be the RLRT event, actually. It's a LEA drop-in clinic. So the concept is you can just show up during a set time. You have the dates here, and we'll make sure that that's communicated to you by email. The concept is that you just come in and you can ask any question you like. We'll have a brief presentation if it's needed, but yeah, the purpose is really to just answer your questions on the Leather Impact Accelerator. So there we go. And next slide, please. Oh yeah, so the upcoming RLRT meetings, we've got one more webinar on traceability, which will be focused on the implementation of traceability solutions in the leather supply chain by brands, and that is scheduled for September, and you'll have more news on that in the Textile Exchange newsletter. And the big event coming up is obviously the Textile Exchange Sustainability Conference, which we held in Dublin and virtually. And so we'll also have our Responsible Leather Roundtable Summit at that point as well. And more information will be shared with you about that shortly. If you want to know more about the Textile Exchange conference, please just follow that link and you'll have all the information you need there. So on that, Anne, I don't know if you want to add a last word or.
No, I just want to say a huge thank you to Sienna and Liesl in particular for joining us, and to everybody for participating and showing your interest, and we really encourage you to take that next step into action. So reach out to us. We are here. We are so keen to lift everything off the ground, whether you're a standard, a supplier, a brand, or a farmer. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and have a
Be a
great
team
day.
again.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye.